If you're into bodybuilding or just curious about the sport's history, you've probably heard of the famous Golden Era. But what exactly was that all about? We're talking about a legendary period that kicked off in the late 1960s and lasted into the early 1980s. It was a time when bodybuilding hit a near-perfect balance between aesthetics, proportion, and symmetry. It wasn't just about being huge. It was about looking powerful, elegant, and harmonious all at once. While today's athletes chase massive size, the Golden Era had a different vibe. Physiques that looked like they were carved by artists. Think narrow waists, broad shoulders, and crisp muscle definition. A silhouette that could have come straight out of ancient Greek statues. Every pose told a story, and stepping on stage felt more like a performance than a flex-off. Ever watched a competition from that era? Totally worth checking out. That's when bodybuilding really started gaining global attention. The launch of the Mr. Olympia contest in 1965 was a game-changer. It gave the sport a serious platform and showcased the best of the best. But things really took off with the release of the documentary Pumping Iron in 1977. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, the film brought bodybuilding into the mainstream and inspired millions of people around the world to hit the gym. Another reason people still admire the Golden Era is the strong sense of community among the athletes. Even though the competitions were intense, there was real camaraderie. It wasn't unusual to see legends training together, swapping tips, and pushing each other to improve. Can you imagine working out alongside someone like Arnold or Franco Columbu? Back then, that actually happened. It wasn't just a sport, it was a full-on lifestyle. So why does the Golden Era still fascinate us decades later? Maybe because it represents a purer version of bodybuilding. A time when it wasn't just about winning, but about inspiring, impressing, and elevating the human form. No social media, no filters, no million-dollar sponsorships, just hard work, passion, and love for the craft. That kind of authenticity still hits home with anyone who truly respects the roots of the sport. Ever imagine what it'd be like to live back then? Training in no-frills gyms, lifting free weights, working out under the sun at Venice Beach, and still building jaw-dropping physiques. Maybe the magic was in the simplicity. No fancy machines, no over-the-top routines, just discipline and consistency. Talking about the Golden Era also means talking about a completely different visual standard. The goal wasn't to be the biggest guy on stage, but the most balanced one. Athletes aimed for that classic V-taper, wide shoulders, flared lats, and a razor-thin waist. It gave them a look that was powerful yet refined, athletic yet graceful. Their bodies were seen as masterpieces of human symmetry. Muscle definition was a big deal too. Every muscle group had to stand out clearly, but without overkill. The separation between biceps, triceps, delts, and pecs was visible, but the overall look still felt smooth and proportionate. Have you noticed how a lot of today's bodybuilders look bloated, while those from the Golden Era looked more natural? That difference made a huge impact on stage presence. And let's talk about posing, because back then, it was just as important as the training itself. These guys spent hours in front of mirrors perfecting every move. They weren't just flexing, they were performing. Many drew inspiration from classical statues and artistic poses, turning competitions into something almost theatrical. In the Golden Era, being strong wasn't enough. You had to look beautiful too. Aesthetics mattered just as much as performance. That's why body development was all about harmony. No muscle could overpower the others. Everything had a flow, with each part of the body complementing the rest. That pursuit of visual perfection is what still draws so many fans to this day. Nowadays, a lot of bodybuilders focus purely on size and bulk, but lose that finesse that once wowed the crowd. Wide waists and overly constructed physiques have become common, pulling modern bodybuilding away from its artistic roots. Golden Era athletes showed that you could be strong, ripped, and visually stunning without going overboard. It was all about smart training, clean eating, and owning the stage with pride. They proved that bodybuilding wasn't just about muscle. It was about creating an image, a feeling, an ideal. And of course, you can't talk about the Golden Era without mentioning the legends who defined it. At the top of that list is Arnold Schwarzenegger. With 7 Mr. Olympia titles, He became the face of the sport, and later a global icon through movies and pop culture. His charisma, proportions, and posing mastery made him the ultimate symbol of that golden age. But Arnold didn't build that legacy alone. Right there with him was Franco Columbu, his best friend and training partner. Even though he was shorter, Franco was a total beast, known for his insane strength and ridiculously dense muscle mass. He proved that size wasn't everything. You could be compact and still dominate. Ever heard about Franco's Olympic-style lifts? They were on another level. Another key name is Frank Zane, who took the idea of aesthetics to the extreme. With a lean, razor-sharp, and perfectly balanced physique, he showed you could win the Mr. Olympia without being the biggest guy on stage. Zane was like moving art, inspiring generations with his refined look and graceful presence. Then there's Sergio Oliva, famously known as the Myth. This guy was a phenomenon. With his freaky bone structure, massive shoulders, and tiny waist, his physique looked almost unreal. When he stepped on stage, it felt like you were seeing the future. A lot of people still say not even Arnold could match Sergio's visual impact at his peak. Among the legends gracing the covers of magazines back then was Dave Draper, the blonde bomber. With his movie star looks and eye-catching build, he became a media darling and even hit the big screen. Draper helped bring bodybuilding beyond the competitive world and showed it could be inspiring even to folks who never planned to compete. Larry Scott, on the other hand, went down in history as the very first Mr. Olympia. What made him stand out? Insane arms and next-level symmetry that set the bar for everyone who followed. Scott proved that you could blaze a new trail in the sport, and that being the first can leave a massive legacy. Imagine being the first champ in the biggest bodybuilding show on earth. Talk about pressure. And let's not forget Serge Nubret, known for his elegance, and Mike Mintzer, the mind behind the revolutionary heavy-duty method. These two brought totally different vibes. Serge wowed the crowd with his sculpted physique and posed like he was dancing. Mike, on the other hand, proved that less training, done right, could lead to more gains. One of the biggest differences between the golden era and today, the way they trained. Those legends built insane physiques using mainly compound lifts like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, and rows. No fancy machines or high-tech cables, just the basics executed perfectly. They believed that lifting free weights with control built real strength and dense muscle. And guess what? It worked. Training volume and frequency were on another level too. It wasn't unusual to hit the gym twice a day, 6 days a week. Sessions lasted 2 to 3 hours, packed with high volume, tons of sets and reps, and short rest periods. They trained with fire and focus, chasing that insane pump every single session. And cardio barely existed. Their shredded look came from clean eating and the sheer brutality of their weight training. The workouts were so intense and exhausting that they didn't need to hop on a treadmill. These days, cardio is part of the routine for most people, but back then, they burned calories by training like warriors. Another magical part of that era was the gym atmosphere. Places like Gold's Gym or Venice Beach weren't just gyms, they were communities. Legends trained side by side, helped each other out, traded ideas, and pushed one another to the next level. It wasn't toxic competition, it was genuine brotherhood. And it wasn't just about lifting, it was about mind-muscle connection. They didn't just go through the motions. Every rep had purpose. They focused on feeling the muscle, controlling every movement, and sculpting their bodies with intent. That created better activation and growth. Nowadays, we've got high-tech gyms, ergonomic machines, training apps, and personal trainers. But even with all that, a lot of people still can't match the results those golden era guys got using nothing but barbells and dumbbells. If your workouts have lost their spark, maybe it's time to bring back some old-school intensity. And when it came to food, they kept it real. The bodybuilders of that era built insane physiques eating actual food. No bars, no mass-market shakes, no magic powders. Their meals were simple: eggs, rice, red meat, chicken, whole milk, oats, potatoes, and tons of discipline. They ate a lot, but they ate with purpose. Supplementation back in the day was simple and straight to the point. Athletes used basic protein powders, usually from milk or eggs, and took standard multivitamins. One popular and kind of old-school supplement was desiccated liver capsules, packed with iron and B-complex vitamins. No fancy pre-workouts loaded with caffeine and beta-alanine or post-workout blends with 10 unpronounceable ingredients. Everything was minimal, and it worked. Fast forward to today, and diet has basically turned into rocket science. We've got apps that track your calories, macros, and micros down to the gram. The supplement options are endless. Pre-workouts, intra-workouts, post-workouts isolate proteins, amino acids, creatine, fat burners, glutamine, you name it. Sure, the tech is helpful, but are we getting a little too dependent on it? Recovery is another huge difference. In the golden era, it was all about quality sleep, rest days, and maybe the occasional deep tissue massage. They respected their bodies and understood that growth required slowing down too, not just grinding 24/7. Nowadays, we've got cryotherapy, compression boots, EMS devices, BCA cocktails, and complex recovery protocols trying to fast-track every process. But somewhere along the way, many modern athletes get lost chasing the perfect formula. They forget that at the end of the day, real muscle is built with good food, hard training, and consistency. Are you relying too much on supplements and forgetting the basics? The golden era guys didn't have any of this modern stuff, and they still built physiques that blow minds even today. The big takeaway here is balance. Modern science is awesome and absolutely useful, but it shouldn't replace the old-school foundations. There's no point buying the most expensive whey protein if your diet is trash and your workouts are lazy. The secret is combining the best of both worlds, the simplicity of the past with the knowledge of today. Now let's talk about that tricky topic people like to avoid, but it needs to be addressed honestly. Steroid use has always existed in bodybuilding, including during the golden era. The difference is, back then, it was more subtle and limited. Stuff like dianabol, decadurabolin, and primobolan were common, usually taken in moderate doses without stacking a bunch of different compounds. There wasn't much reliable info, so guys relied on their own experience or word of mouth from gym buddies. These days, it's a whole different game. Steroid use is way more aggressive, calculated, and widespread. Modern athletes run complex cycles involving multiple compounds: trenbolone, HGH, clenbuterol, anavar, and so on. They've got access to stronger formulas and tons of info about what to take, when, and how much. But with that knowledge came excess. The question is it really worth pushing that far? Post-cycle therapy, PCT, is another area that's evolved. Back then, very few bodybuilders knew how to help their bodies bounce back after a cycle. Now, there are detailed protocols to help restore natural hormone production and reduce side effects. Still, even with all this support, the risks are high. Liver and kidney damage, heart issues, hormone imbalances, they're all very real consequences. Access is another factor. Today, you can get steroids online or at your local gym without much effort. That's led to more casual use, even by teens who haven't trained properly or don't fully understand the risks. In the golden era, even though steroids were present, there was more respect for the substances. They were seen as a supplement, not the foundation. It's important to remember that not every massive physique is just the result of hard work and clean eating. In many cases, steroids make a huge difference. And it's not about judging anyone. It's about being real about what's behind the image. If you train naturally, compare yourself to your past self, not to someone playing in a whole different league with chemical help. In the end, steroid use is a personal decision, but one that needs to be made with full awareness and responsibility. One of the biggest complaints about modern bodybuilding is the look of the waistline. Have you noticed how a lot of today's athletes have wider, bloated-looking abs, even with low body fat? That's what people call the bubble gut, and it's bothering even the sport's most loyal fans. But where does it come from? The answer is a combo of extreme hormone use, massive bulking phases, and a shift in bodybuilding's overall philosophy. The main culprit behind this abdominal growth is high-dose usage of GH, growth hormone, and insulin. These compounds don't just grow muscle. They also enlarge internal organs like the liver, intestines, and kidneys. Over time, that pushes the belly outward, even without fat. Back in the golden era, the use of GH or insulin was rare or non-existent, which is why their waistline stayed tight and controlled. Another big factor behind that bloated midsection look is extreme bulking. A lot of today's bodybuilders eat anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 calories a day just to maintain their massive size. But that kind of food volume also leads to visceral fat buildup, the kind that accumulates between your organs. So even if the skin looks lean, the gut's still being pushed outward from the inside. Modern bodybuilding's obsession with overall mass also plays a role in the loss of waist control. Athletes today train to be the biggest on stage, not necessarily the most aesthetic. Meanwhile, back in the golden era, the goal was to build a clean, flowing physique with a tight, tapered waistline. Another major shift came from the way judging criteria evolved. These days, many competitions reward the biggest, most packed physiques, even if that means sacrificing a clean midsection. But during the time of Arnold and Zane, symmetry and core control were what set champions apart. It's a clear sign that our idea of the ideal physique has changed over time. One of the defining features of golden era physiques was abdominal control. Athletes regularly trained something called the stomach vacuum, pulling the stomach inward to strengthen the transverse abdominis. This gave them more control and helped keep their posture strong and their midsections flat while posing. Today, very few athletes do this, and you can see the difference. But what really made the golden era unforgettable wasn't just the physiques. It was the culture that brought the athletes together. Back then, bodybuilding was more than a sport. It was a lifestyle, almost like a brotherhood. No social media, no likes, no filters. Everything was earned in the gym and proven on stage. A bodybuilder's reputation came from their daily grind, their presence at competitions, and their photos in the top fitness magazines. Magazines like Muscle and Fitness and Flex were the main platforms showcasing these athletes. Every photo published was a badge of honor, a reward for months of dedication. Those magazines didn't just sell muscle. They sold discipline, inspiration, and authenticity. Being featured was a big deal, and the people in those pages were seen as real role models. The gym environment was a whole different world too. Places like Gold's Gym in Venice Beach were more like bodybuilding temples. Athletes trained barefoot, wore plain clothes, and used basic equipment. No flashy LEDs, no blasting music, no imported machines, just iron dumbbells, sweat on the floor, and real camaraderie. What's mind-blowing is how much they achieved with so little. Some of the best physiques in history were built in gyms that had barely any gear, but were full of grit and passion. There was mutual respect, encouragement, and way less ego outside the spotlight. Nowadays, a lot of gyms feel more like fashion shows than training grounds. Of course, it wasn't a perfect world. There was still ego, jealousy, and rivalry, but that all took a back seat to the grind. It was a place where athletes pushed each other, held each other accountable, and found motivation in one another. Some of the fiercest rivals were also the best training partners. Another thing that stood out was how simple the lifestyle was. No luxury, no showing off. These guys ate basic meals, trained like beasts, and stayed the course. They were regular dudes chasing extraordinary goals. And maybe that's what makes the golden era so special. It reminds us that you don't need much to achieve greatness. Even decades later, the golden era still lives in the hearts of bodybuilding fans around the world. The physiques from that time are still considered the gold standard of aesthetics for a whole generation of athletes. They prove that you can combine power, symmetry, and elegance in one body. To this day, many coaches still use Arnold's, Zane's, or Oliva's proportions as reference points when shaping future champions. But those legends left more than just big muscles. They passed down a philosophy of life. Training was serious, but full of passion. Eating clean wasn't a trend, it was a necessity. Rest, posing, and mental focus were part of the routine. These guys lived bodybuilding, body and soul, and it showed in everything they did. The contrast with today's scene couldn't be more obvious. Now it's all about fast results, shortcuts, and appearances. Discipline is rare, and consistency has been traded for urgency. But the golden era reminds us that the best results come with time, effort, and patience. There's no magic, just solid, honest work. The physiques of the golden era are still being studied, copied, and admired all over the world. And it's not just nostalgia. It's proof that true excellence is timeless. Those legends made it clear that bodybuilding is a blend of science, art, and soul. The body can be sculpted like a masterpiece, but it takes a strong mind and a steady heart to make it happen. What's even more powerful is that their legacy goes far beyond the stage. Many golden era athletes became teachers, authors, speakers, and symbols of perseverance. They showed that bodybuilding can transform lives, physically and emotionally. And today, more than ever, we need role models like that. People who inspire through consistency, not ego. Maybe that's the most beautiful part of the golden era. It reminds us that bodybuilding is a living art form. Every workout is a brushstroke. Every meal adds color. And every daily decision takes you one step closer to a stronger version of yourself. It doesn't matter if you're natural, a beginner, or a seasoned athlete. The principles that created legends still work for all of us. The golden era wasn't just a phase in bodybuilding. It was a cultural movement that fused strength with art, sweat with beauty, and brotherhood with resilience. Those men didn't just sculpt their bodies. They carved out a philosophy of life that continues to inspire millions. Looking back isn't just about being sentimental. It's about reviving values that still matter today. Daily discipline, love for the grind, respect for your body, and appreciation for the journey. It's remembering that muscles aren't just built through technique, but through intention. If you've made it this far, it's because you share this same passion for the history and soul of bodybuilding. So go ahead and hit that like button. It helps the channel a lot and keeps content like this coming your way. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Click that button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly videos, packed with quality, respect, and pure motivation. And if you want to take it a step further, consider becoming a channel member. Your support helps us keep the memory and legacy of the greatest bodybuilding legends alive, and you'll get access to exclusive content made for real fans of the sport. Our community is built by people who truly love this lifestyle, and we'd love to have you with us. Now I want to hear from you. Which golden era physique inspires you the most? And what lesson from that era do you want to bring into your own routine? Thanks for being part of this journey with us. May the strength and inspiration of the golden era fuel every one of your workouts. See you in the next video. And remember, muscle is built with grit, consistency, and art. Always.